This is Dr. DigiPol Show, Episode 2, Campaigns Engaging Women, Epic Fail or Not? That's the question today, and we have a couple of great guests to help us explore this. We're going to be talking to Michelle Coyle, who is the COO of Women Get It Done, and Lisa Max, who is the top policy advisor, I believe, VP of Public Policy at the American Association of University Women. And later on in the show, we'll be joined by Paul Singer from USA Today for the Trending in Politics segment. And then we'll open it up for questions from everybody else. So we're really, really excited. Of course, we always have Ken Bazinet with us, producer, former White House correspondent for New York Daily News, and all-around great asset to have. And Daniel's telling me to speak it louder or more into the mic, so hopefully I am doing so. And we will move forward from there. Daniel, you can raise your hand if I'm still having issues. So today, as I said, we're going to be talking about the degree to which the campaigns are engaging women. Just a quick background, this is the Dr. DigiPol Show. I am Alan Rosenblatt, aka Dr. DigiPol. This has been my Twitter handle ever since the days of AOL Instant Messenger. Actually, it's been my handle since Instant Messenger, when you could only have 10 characters. And I figured, well, Doctor of Digital Politics, right? That's what it's about. I've got a PhD in political science. I teach courses on digital politics. In fact, I taught the world's first college course on digital politics back in 1995. As far as I know, it's the first. I haven't seen anything else that anybody else claim otherwise. And so that's where that comes from. And this show is about the intersection of digital and social media and politics, the way it's impacting the political process. We take a deep dive every week into some specialty topic, but we also do a segment every week which we call Trending in Politics or Tip, the tip of the week, where we look at some of the things that are trending in politics. And of course, you're all able to participate in the conversation by, if you posting a question, raising your hand. If you want to be put on camera to ask your question, just indicate at the end of the question that when you type it in that you want to go on cam or not, and we will, or that you want to go on cam. If you don't say you want to go on cam, I won't add you to cam, and I'll just read your question. So with that, I'm going to bring Michelle up to the stage. Hi, Michelle. Say hi to the Dr. DigiPol audience.
Hey, Dr. DigiPol audience. How you doing?
I think they're doing really well, and slowly but surely they're coming online here. Michelle, you work with a company called, or an organization called Women Get It Done. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and what the organization does?
Sure. Women Get It Done is a C4 advocacy organization, chapters throughout the country. We are organizing women, creating safe spaces to make meaningful connections with each other, to have real talk discussions with each other. The idea is to sort of create a network of women that will combat an old boys network so that we can really start to help each other out. We're also engaging women for political advocacy. We're a bipartisan group, and we don't support specific candidates, but we do support issues that affect our membership, like equal pay, like family leave. Recently, our San Francisco chapter was organizing around getting the judge in the Brock Turner case. So we are spread throughout the country, mobilize women for political issues that affect us.
Great. Well, that's sounds like really important work, and really relevant to this challenge that we have now with regard to getting women involved in politics. Not that they aren't involved in politics, obviously. Not only do they have a long history of being involved in politics, or not as long as it should have been, since they just got the vote in 1920, which is still less than 100 years ago. And also because there's a woman running for president, which is the first time that's happened in a major party. And in fact, half of the people running for president this year, among the 4 candidates out there, are women. So that's also an interesting an interesting point. So I want you to, I've posed the title of the show as to whether or not engaging women by the campaign is an epic fail or not. And my understanding is that you think that they've done a pretty good job. So why don't you give me an example or two of what you think that's going well?
Well, I'll caveat that and say I don't think that they're doing an amazing job. I think that Hillary's job has been made easier this year in terms of engaging women by some of the things that are going on with the Trump campaign and him doing a lot of work to alienate women. I don't think campaigns in general do a great job of engaging women whatsoever, which is tragic and actually a tragic error since women do over-index in voting really up and down across the board. I think that Hillary's doing an okay job. So if you want me to kind of give some examples there, yeah, we really are starting to see. Okay. I mean, the first obvious thing that she did where she could have balked at some of the things that Donald Trump was doing, but leaning into the woman card thing, I thought was a brilliant strategic move by the campaign, actually producing woman cards and sending woman cards out. Was fantastic. I think that the campaign is starting to understand and tap into how women engage politically, which is a lot less overtly sometimes than men do, especially when it comes to online engagement, social word of mouth engagement. We know that a lot of women will feel a little bit uncomfortable talking to their friends about politics, for instance. Even a lot of ardent Hillary supporters online have organized into secret Hillary groups, which have just now been coming to light in the mainstream press. I'm in a few of them, and they're kind of interesting. There's a lot of discussion in those groups about how people are afraid to put stickers on their car. They're afraid to put yard signs. There are stories coming out where people are getting vandalized for showing support for Hillary. And so I think the campaign is starting to realize that these people are there. They're ardent supporters, and they really want to engage, but they're not going to necessarily engage in some of the more traditional overt ways, and they're not going to be as visible. So it is, how do we get women talking to women in a way that everybody is comfortable with and still keeps feeling safe? And so it's an interesting strategic challenge, because that's a big departure from how campaigns have engaged all voters in the past.
Yeah, indeed, it's been an interesting approach. And I like your comment about how it's been a lot easier than it could have been, because Trump seems to be driving women away and towards the campaign. So there's sort of a fire under women voters' feet, getting them to get involved, I guess, out of fear. I'll be a little flip right here. Do you think that? So you don't think that Donald Trump saying that he cherishes women and that he will be the best president for women ever, that's not effectively engaging women?
No, not at all. I think the only tool that they really pulled out at all is Ivanka, to engage women, and they're really hitting Ivanka hard. It's kind of funny, just poking around the internet, I started getting targeted with ads, win a chance to meet Ivanka. Came up at the convention, and she gave what sounded like a very liberal Democratic convention speech about family leave and about how her dad would support all of those policies, which was the first that we had really heard of any of that, and we hadn't really seen any evidence of that. So it was out of left field, but it seems like with the campaign, they're saying, if all we have to do is trot out Ivanka, she's going to say things that young and middle-aged women want to hear, and this is really what we need to do. And here's, I'm not sexist because I hired Ivanka. That was the quote a couple of days ago. My dad's not sexist. He hired me. So that's been kind of interesting. I mean, we're starting to see the campaign shape up quite a bit, the Trump campaign overall, and just become a more professional campaign in the last few weeks. They are starting Women for Trump groups in different states, as is Hillary. But it's really too little too late, I think. I mean, he keeps making these giant gaffes that are just driving women away, I think even with some of the Republican women driving women to Johnson, there's a big Republican Women for Hillary, that Jen Lim is doing, and I think it's kind of catching fire now because he's just not doing anything to embrace it.
Well, so you mentioned that there are some things, some specific events that Hillary Clinton's been doing, and I noticed that she just announced a big Women's Action Week in Michigan yesterday or today. So can you tell me a couple things that that we can look for in terms of what they've been doing?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really smart that they've been doing and are really ramping up is roundtables where either Hillary herself or a top-level surrogate, female surrogate, will sit down with women in a very specific group. So if it's a women in business group or if it's about a specific issue. And really, it's almost like a focus group. But so the voters are feeling listened to, but the campaign is also getting one-on-one. And sometimes Hillary herself is having these conversations that she can then reference in speeches. She can personalize. I was just talking to a woman in Michigan last week, and she had this issue that you're talking about now. I think that's a brilliant way to engage women. It's really leaning into the way that women often engage with each other in small social circles. Women really want to be in a situation where they feel safe. A lot of us, when we're on the internet, it doesn't feel safe for us to share our political opinions. It doesn't feel safe to talk about these issues. So we're talking about them in small groups with each other. And to see the campaign engaging with women in that way is really heartening to me.
Let me, before I switch over to Lisa, one question. What you mentioned about engaging in politics on the internet as a woman. Do you find that when you start to post on Twitter and Facebook about politics, that you get trolled by misogynist men?
All the time. I haven't gotten some of the very scary death threats that I think some of my peers have gotten. I get things like the other day somebody said, I said, oh, Donald is shouting, I'm going deaf watching him speak. And they said, you should go blind too. You'd be an uglier Helen Keller. I found that amusing, but that's the sort of thing that I get all the time, self-identifying as a feminist and being vocal on the internet.
It's interesting. I get trolled for being a liberal by conservatives. That's one thing. But I don't ever get trolled for being a man and by men haters. And I just find that it's very hard, I think, for men to truly appreciate what women go through online because we just don't experience it the way you do.
Well, I think women are targeted in very specific ways. I mean, if you do this quite a bit, you start to see the same patterns over and over to where you can almost find it amusing. But by men and women trolls, it's you're ugly, you're slutty, you're a bad mom. These type of personal attacks that really have nothing to do with what you're saying and are really just societal tropes for bad things we could say about women. Women's value is in the way we look. It's in our motherhood and it's in our our virtue. So those are the things that people are going to attack online, regardless of what you're saying. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I try to find some humor in it, but it can get scary.
Years ago, we're talking back in the mid to late 90s, when instant messengers were first started to come up. I was a professor. I was doing all this research on online politics, and I set up a couple of different accounts, male and female fictional characters, to try to see what different reactions. And it was really remarkable the different reactions I got from people and the kinds of trolling that the female account got compared to my own personal account as a male. And so I would encourage men out there who are interested in getting a firsthand experience about what it's like to be a woman on social media, create a Twitter account, a second Twitter account with a woman's picture and set up, a fake woman ID and go out there and talk about politics and see what reactions you get, because I think you'll find it quite illuminating. All right, I'm going to swap Lisa out for up on Cam and moment here. And welcome to the program, Lisa Matz, Vice President of Public Policy. Is that correct?
Yes, Vice President of Public Policy and Advocacy. We just add that.
Excellent. So more work, less pay, right?
Indeed.
Yes, indeed. So tell us, before we get into the main topic here, just can you give us a little bit of a background of what AAUW does?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Dr. DigiPol, congratulations on this new show. It's very exciting, and I really appreciate you having me on. AAUW is a nationwide grassroots membership organization. And our mission really is to empower women and girls through advocacy, education, research, and philanthropy. We've been around since 1881, so we're kind of the original uppity women, if you will. These were women back in 1881 that were getting college degrees and had the nerve to think other women should get them as well and should participate in our civic society. Since then, we've evolved not only in terms of caring about education and being, say, the protectors and defenders of Title IX, but we're a pro-choice group. We are leading the fight in terms of equal pay for equal work and work-based family policies. We are doing a lot of work to get more women and girls in STEM. And like I said, we're grassroots. We've got about 170,000 members and supporters around the country, 1,000 branches. We have branches in every congressional district. Just today, the Action Fund released our congressional voting record for the 114th Congress. So if anybody's interested in checking out how their members of Congress did voting on issues important to women, we've just got that put forward. And this fall, of course, we're spending a lot of time on getting out the vote and voter education through C3 and C4 methods. And our members are really excited. They're very invested in this election, but they're also really nervous about it in a way I haven't seen since 2000, quite frankly. So we've been doing a lot to give them the tools that they need, hopefully, to respond and get women to the polls, because when women are part of the conversation, we change policies.
Certainly, the opinion data shows that, women, demographic and opinion data definitely show that women have the potential to swing this election entirely across the country.
I think women will be, to use the phrase, the deciders. Women will make that decision. Young women coming to the polls are going to be huge, because for the first time we're now seeing more millennials coming to the polls than seniors who've been that traditional bloc. But also women of color have, I think, some great power in this particular election, not only in their own votes, but how they can drive votes amongst the men in their community. So we're looking forward to really, quite frankly, an unprecedented turnout amongst women voters for this election.
So what is the typical women voter turnout in elections?
Well, the typical voter turnout period in the United States is pathetic, right? I mean, we don't have nearly enough.
Being the great world democracy.
That's right. But women are much more likely to vote than men are. They're more likely to be registered. They're also more likely to vote. They're also more likely to vote Democratic. And so it's a part of the reason why both political parties have started focusing on women, because you can't win without them. It's also part of why we always have those nifty names, right? There's the soccer moms, there were the security moms, there were the whatever particular subgroup of women is the key in a particular election. This year, I think it's really going to be about non-college educated women and whether or not they spin off for Trump or they spin off for Hillary. Hillary's been doing a lot of work trying to appeal to them, but Trump's economic message, that populist, I hear you and nobody doesn't, and I'm your best friend, has been appealing to them in ways that, quite frankly, I think have flummoxed the political establishment, but is something that is going to be interesting as it unfolds towards the election.
So you are quite active on social media. I see you on Twitter all the time, popping up on Facebook. What kind of experience are you getting when you talk about politics? What kind of reaction are you getting from people? And you differentiate between women reacting to you and men reacting?
Absolutely. I find that if I'm able to have a good conversation with someone who believes differently than me, it's oftentimes with a woman, where we can at least agree to disagree and have a civil conversation. I certainly get some trolls who question my intelligence, who like to make insulting comments about my appearance, who like to say bad things about AAUW. We've been around a long time, and so AAUW itself is often a target. I can't say that I've ever felt physically threatened, but I certainly have been insulted, and I certainly have seen, I'll tell you, the worst that has come out, not just about the election, but anytime I talk about campus sexual assault, boy, do I get the trolls then. I testified just about this time last year before a House committee on campus sexual assault, and I've never seen such kind of vilification. So it's interesting. It depends on the topic within policy and politics that I'm talking about, but it does run the gamut.
Yeah, this Brock Turner decision really, lit up across the internet with this. It's interesting, even to the fact where the headlines would say, Stanford swimmer released earlier instead, and the uproar I saw was, it should really read Stanford rapist is released early, and we seem to, have this soft spot in our collective impression, or at least mainstream impression, that star athletes somehow get a lighter ride.
I think that's true, especially star athletes if they're white.
Yes. Let me ask you: did you happen to catch last night's Matt Lauer interviews with Trump and Hillary Clinton?
I watched part of it. It was a little painful, quite frankly. I'm worried about these debates coming up, Alan, because I think there may need to be some adult beverages. AUW's got some bingo games people can use in that vein. I think we're going to need to be able to entertain ourselves and distract ourselves from some of the quite literally craziness that's going to be coming our way. It's a lot of crazy last night.
I mean, the big complaint last night, which blew up on Twitter, and Lauer has just been skewered about this, was that he held Hillary Clinton to a much higher standard of factual accuracy than he did Donald Trump. In fact, the comments are that he let Trump skate on virtually everything. And on the one hand, this is your classic, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards into the heels. Women have to do things so much higher standard in order to be taken seriously than men in this country. And here we have, Hillary Clinton, who knows so much about foreign policy, has so much experience working in the field, and Donald Trump, who consistently seems to know nothing and make errors all the time and say these outlandish things that even dumping on generals when the generals go, what? So and he gets no scrutiny for it, and she gets. So it seems to me that one of the most important things organizations like AUW, like Women Get It Done, and other organizations, and not just women's organizations, are to make sure that in these debates coming up, that in the event or regardless of whether or not the moderators are fact-checking, there has to be a steady stream of fact-checking online during the debate.
Yeah, there has to be a steady stream of fact-checking, and you're right. They absolutely hold Hillary Clinton to a higher standard, and not just a higher standard, but a ridiculously, I think, unreasonable standard. And the reality is quite frankly, even with some of that ridiculous standard being put to the test, she often meets it. I mean, this is an incredibly qualified candidate. Now, AUW doesn't endorse, but the reality is we're going to call out misogyny in politics regardless of the party. We stepped up to the plate and defended Carly Fiorina when they didn't want to let her into the debate, right? I mean, the reality is the optics of this election have been fascinating because, as Michelle said, Trump has, if he's using misogyny as a campaign tactic, that's the first one for me. And he seems to be using it to channel women to Hillary Clinton. At the same time, he does have this daughter who goes out and talks about these issues. But at the same time, she's selling the dress that she wore to give her speech at the Republican National Convention. That was one of the tweets. You can look like me. It's a fascinating kind of...
selling the dress?
It's part of her collection that she has. I don't know what store it's at, but that was literally, this is the dress I'm wearing, and you can buy it too. I really feel like between the woman card, which was a great thing I thought that Hillary did. One of the things that's different, by the way, Alan, in this election, is that in 2008, Hillary kind of ran away from being a woman. And this time, she is absolutely embracing it. And that is, I think, been huge, not only in terms of how she conducts herself and what she says, but also in terms of the issues she's willing to be specific about. I don't see a speech where she doesn't talk about equal pay. I don't see a speech where she doesn't talk about something that's very specific to women and families.
So what is the reason? Is this because she saw this as a mistake in 2008 and is correcting it? Because society has become more accepting of a major candidate as being a woman since 2008 because of the success that she had then? What is the reason for this transition?
I think it's a combination of things. I think certainly people are more used to seeing women in these campaign positions, right? We saw a Republican woman in Carly Fiorina. As you said earlier, we've got Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton running. So 2 of the 4 that are the most known candidates are women. That's great. I think the other part of it is, she has been very honest about the fact that she's not the natural politician her husband is.
Yeah, but nobody is.
Nobody is. That's right. I mean, that's like meeting Bill Clinton is like walking into a wall of charisma, right? But with Hillary Clinton, I do feel like she has gotten more comfortable in her own skin. I don't think you can underscore the importance enough of her becoming a grandmother and how that has. She's always been a feminist and always been concerned about gender issues, but now she not only has this daughter, she has this granddaughter, these new life experiences for her. I don't think you can discount all the things she did at the Department of State for women around the world and what she saw on her travels about the true state of gender equality on the planet. All of that, I think, has informed her to the point where she's like, look, this is who I am. These are issues that I care about. I'm not a one-trick pony because they're not the only issues I care about, but I'm going to talk about them. And I do think that women are responding to that because women want to hear about kitchen table economics. They want to hear about what you're going to do to make my life easier today and tomorrow and next week. What are you going to do to help me make a better life for my kids? And she's putting specifics out there on exactly the kinds of issues that women want to hear about.
So we're going to bring Paul Singer from USA Today up after you, but he just texted me in the background here, and he said nobody cares about facts anymore. And from what I just heard you say, maybe it's different. Maybe men don't care about facts and women do, or is there something to that?
It's interesting that you say that and that he said that. I do think that we need to hold journalists to a higher standard in terms of caring about those facts and doing that fact checking, as you said right at the top of the interview.
And full disclosure, Paul is really strong on facts.
And absolutely. But I also think that part of the issue here is that when it comes to Hillary Clinton, there are facts, and then there are what other people think of kind of the whole Clinton dynasty. Facts, quite frankly, as you said, aren't necessarily what are driving people. Are they driving it differently because of gender? I think tone drives things differently because of gender. I think Donald Trump's insults and his constant flow of disrespect to people turns women off. But I do think that women look for some accuracy, at least in terms of, does that candidate seem to understand where I'm coming from? Maybe they don't have the right percentage. Maybe they don't have, real specifics about a policy. But do I feel like they understand where I'm coming from? Do I feel like they get what it's like to balance childcare, to try and find a decent school for my kid? Do I feel like they understand? And then from there, if they do, women start digging deeper beyond that. But that's the first thing that opens, I think, the door for women. And I think that Hillary Clinton has been able to do that much more strongly than Donald Trump. At the same time, the other thing that Hillary cannot do is rest on her laurels, right? We still got many days to go, and she's got to turn out the women vote, right? And women voters can sometimes be lazier voters. If it rains, if childcare is late, if they're late at a doctor's appointment with the kid, sometimes priorities shift.
And yet there's still a higher turnout than men.
Yet there's still a higher turnout. I think more and more women, quite frankly, are taking advantage of early voting. They're planning. They're planning for their votes. Right. It's those who haven't planned that sometimes miss because of family responsibilities, quite frankly. So that's why groups like AEW are offering childcare and rides to the polls and anything we can do that will be useful to make sure that we get women to speak their minds.
And one last question before I switch over to Paul. There's been some major fallout at Fox News with regard to sexual harassment. Gretchen Carlson got a $20 million settlement. Greta Van Susteren is leaving the network, and it seems like there may be some connection between the two, although it hasn't been explicitly stated. Megyn Kelly has said she's been harassed. Up and down, there's like half a dozen and a dozen women correspondents and anchors there who have really stepped up and said it's a problem. What do you? Is there a connection between what's happening at Fox and how women are perceiving this election? Is Fox being tied close enough to the Republican conservative political space that there would be some impact?
You know what I find fascinating about putting the Fox situation in context with the election is that it feels to me like women, and when I say women, I don't just mean liberal women or progressive women or even moderate women, but conservative women are fed up with the misogyny, with the discrimination, with the in-your-face stuff. Here's a woman, Gretchen Carlson, who is a commentator on a conservative network, a conservative woman herself, who had the courage to come forward and say, one of the most powerful men in the country sexually harassed me. And then all these women came forward to support her. That's a huge statement, because not only was it rampant at Fox News, but it was being cared for and fed at the highest levels of the organization. And I think in many respects, we see that at other corporations too. We don't always have women who are able to come forward, because let's face it, we're not all going to have the privilege that Gretchen Carlson does in terms of being able to support herself if she ends up leaving a job and so on and so forth. But the reality is, boy, I tell you what, I feel like women have just reached a new level of being sick and tired of being sick and tired and discriminated against. And what's different for me is that I see that from conservative women too, who are willing to call it out, largely because of what Trump's doing. They're willing to call him out, and it's just beyond the pale. So that's not about politics. It's about basic equality and civility, and women across the board are done with the crazy.
I hear you. Looks like Michelle wants to chime in here. I'm going to swap her in for you a second. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, I'm just sitting here saying preach, because this is what I'm hearing over and over. We are sick of it. Everyone that I know, every woman I talk to privately has a sexual harassment story. Some of them are very egregious. Exactly, like most people can't afford to quit their job. Most people know they make a personal calculus. This is not something that I can afford to take the career hit or to be known for this, and the guy's going to end up getting away with it anyway. Until 20 women that come out and say something about this guy, there's nothing any of us can do. And so when we see a woman come up, like Hillary come up, I was at a convention, people were crying. You know why? When she accepted the nomination, women are bawling. And why do we feel, and I have the same rush of emotion, why do we feel it? And it's because we are looking at a woman who has been through this ringer for years and for decades. And we know, she's been hit on, she's dealt with every sexist roadblock that can possibly be dealt with. She's been a mother. She's dealt with all the discrimination around that. She was told, she needed to bake better cookies when she was First Lady of Arkansas. She was, she's gone through normal woman experiences that frankly make our lives more difficult that we're not allowed to talk about. She's going, this is somebody who's been through all of this stuff. She's a grandma. She's literally been through an entire lifetime of female experiences, and she's way more qualified than anybody else. And hallelujah, somebody gets it. Somebody understands us. And so her campaign leaning into these issues that women care about is very important, just like what Lisa was saying. She's sitting there talking about, if you go on her website right now under issues, there's mental health, there's substance abuse, there's elder care issues, there are parental leave issues, issues that women really start to connect with because it affects our day-to-day lives. We're the ones with the responsibility to care for everybody else a lot of the time. And Hillary is sitting there talking about issues very specifically that affect all aspects of that, where you don't hear Trump talking about it whatsoever.
Right.
So I got excited about, yes.
I saw the hand go up.
We've all been through this, and so is she.
Yeah. So we're going to come to questions. I know Joya and Daniel both have questions, and we'll get to you. But I want to get Paul up here before we move on to Q&A. So we're bringing up Paul Singer, who is a political correspondent for USA Today, formerly at Roll Call. One of my favorite things about Paul is that he likes waking up really, really early in the morning to read the Federal Register. still do that? Oh, I can't hear you, Paul.
So,
no. Paul?
No.
You there, Paul? Oh, hold on one sec. Well, so Paul is getting his while Paul is getting his mic checked with Max, I'm going to Joya, I'm going to spotlight you for a quick moment here. Hi, Joya. Are you there? Nope, I guess I'm not going to be able to hear you.
Hi, Alan. How are you?
Ah, there you are. Hi. Did you have a comment or question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I do have a question.
Yes,
have
please.
a question. I have a question for both of the ladies who are your guests today. Yes, I have a question for both of the ladies who are your guests. I have joined an organization from the Clinton campaign called Executive Women for Hillary. And I own my own business, and so I was very excited to join this group. I thought that my African American colleagues who own their own businesses, who are executives in major companies, would join along with me, and we would start to do salons and days. However, I got a lot of resistance, and I can understand the resistance. The resistance is that there is no outreach to African American women in this competition, and so we are faced with the exact same issues of harassment, hiring, and lack of income or lack of salary equity. We have other problems. And I'm very happy that Hillary has embraced the mothers of the movement. Those women are heroes and are very important to the national conversation, but there is no outreach to executive women who are an entire middle of African American women who are not mentioned at all. And a lot of the resentment I heard from my colleagues was when Loretta Lynch was swinging in, trying to get confirmation, there was nothing from the traditional women's movement to come to her support. And it appears to me and my African American female colleagues that when race is involved in a women's issue, white women tend not to want to be in the conversation. It has to be purely women. But Loretta Lynch's situation was not primarily because she was Black. It was primarily because she was appointed by Obama. But she was also a woman in need of support. African American female organizations were there. Where was NOW? Where were all the other organizations? So I think that there is a real problem because African American women in the middle are talking to me about staying home. And that is the last thing Hillary needs. This large group of women, college educated, entrepreneurial leaning women, to stay home. Right. We're not in the conversation. So I'd like your guest to address that issue.
Okay. Michelle or Lisa, take a guess. Lisa, I'm going to put you up for a moment. Hi, Lisa.
Hi there. Well, that's an excellent question, quite frankly. Yeah, I was, and that's both an excellent question, an excellent challenge and critique. I think the mainstream women's movement has a lot of work in terms of being more intersectional in our analysis. I think there are efforts for that, but we need to be better. We also need to tout that we're doing it. We just spent a lot of time publicizing Black Women's Equal Pay Day and doing a lot of work for that in August. That was huge because we recognize that there's a pay gap and it affects all women, but it affects women differently. And women of color and moms are especially vulnerable to that. We've done some work, you mentioned Loretta Lynch, to deal with gender bias in policing. We were one of the driving forces pushing for that new guidance that came out because we know that women of color in particular are vulnerable to police, not simply in the way that we've seen playing out in the mainstream media, but in terms of sexual harassment and sexual assault and being further victimized by police, unscrupulous police. But I take the comment with the spirit with which it's intended, and that is we always need to do better. In terms of the Clinton campaign, I think this is a critique that came around a lot during 2008. It may be a place where she has not learned her lesson as well as she has in perhaps being able to speak to gender issues as much as she can speak to race issues. But at the same time, I think, as Joy said very eloquently, the intersectionality is the key. Where does it all meet? When you're a woman, when you're a woman of color, when you may have a disability, when you may have a different economic status, all these different things come together in different ways for different people. So that, I'm not just a white woman, I have other identities that might not be as visible. That is something that, in terms of campaigning, and quite frankly, social media, where we can be better at calling out the differences, calling out the commonalities, but really being key about focusing on intersectionality, because none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, and that's critical. I would absolutely recommend the African American Policy Forum, run by Kim Crenshaw. She is the mother of intersectionality in terms of academic study, but she's done some great work with this in terms of Say Her Name and Black Women's Lives Matter, to try and augment that broader conversation to realize that once again, within that, we have gender differences that need to be addressed.
Excellent. Well, we've got Paul back here. I'm going to try to put him back up. Thank you, Lisa, for that. And hey, Paul. No, can't hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, good. This happens. So,
Where to go?
There you go. Hey, Paul, welcome.
Did you hear me?
I hear you.
Hey. So can I put the headset in now?
Yep. So, welcome to Paul Singer, who writes about politics for USA Today. And one of the big reasons why I wanted Paul to come in today is because this really amazing tool that that USA Today has put together with Facebook, called the Facebook Candidate Barometer, is back up online. Paul, I'm going to ask you to describe it. I'm going to go off cam for a minute and put up a screenshot of the tool while you talk, and then I'll be back in a moment. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, what we've done here is got a partnership with Facebook where we are gathering simply the bulk data on the number of likes, shares, comments, and posts about each of the presidential candidates. We did this during the primary season, and you could see over time how the conversation about the candidates would spike and ebb over time. It's sort of interesting to see. Of course, needless to say, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump sort of competed week in and week out for who would have the most volume in Facebook chatter. We've just relaunched it now with Trump, Clinton, Jill Stein, and Gary Johnson. Again, it is still Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump who are at the top of the volume, but you can see Stein and Gary Johnson sort of trolling at the bottom. It's an interesting conversation to have. If you're having 70 million people a week talking about Donald Trump, does that completely drown out the 3 million people a week who are talking about Gary Johnson? But we also have an opportunity to see within the data some interesting things. Like you'll see that Gary Johnson, the way the barometer is set up, it'll show you who is in the conversation. So the conversation about Gary Johnson tends to be dominated by younger people, and it tends to be dominated by men, actually, which should not surprise you given this conversation. Gary Johnson supporters tend to be male-dominated. Hillary Clinton's conversation on Facebook tends to trend much older and more female. Clinton's conversation has a highest percentage amongst the four candidates, the highest percentage of conversation from people over the age of 55. And it also gives you an opportunity to see where they're sort of dominating the conversation most, which 5 states they're getting the highest share of the conversation compared to each other, and which 5 states they're getting the lowest share of the conversation. We think it's kind of fun, particularly over time, as you see the trends moving, people peaking and dropping off. It's sort of interesting to get a sense of how much penetration into the conversation each of these candidates is getting.
So I find this really interesting because, as you know, during the lead up to the primaries, you had the GOP Power Rankings series, which I participated in, and I was always looking at buzz on social media as my marker of who to rank at the top, and based on that, I ranked Trump at #1 all but 2 weeks, and lo and behold, he wins the nomination. And I use this tool frequently for that purpose.
Well, as Trump has said, there's no such thing as bad press, and he argues essentially, and his campaign is a case study in the notion that if you can just occupy all of the space, all of the conversational space about politics, you win. Now, Hillary Clinton has a sufficient megaphone to compete with him, I would say. He's getting, significantly more links and likes and shares and comments on Facebook than she is, but they're sort of a measure of each other. They're not. He is not sort of 10 times as much as she is, the way he is 10 times as much as Gary Johnson. But again, remember, none of this is sentiment analysis. I have not asked this machine how many of these comments on the Facebook are, gosh, Donald Trump said something stupid today. But for the purposes of just talking about sheer volume of conversation, I'm not sure Trump cares.
Right. So in the current presentation, unfortunately, I can't get the screen back on, but there is a Clinton's got 48 million likes, comments, shares, and mentions in the past week. Donald Trump is about 75 million. So he has an appreciable lead, but she is way above where we were seeing the numbers during the primaries of all the other candidates. And so, as you say, it's a significant share of the conversation.
But it's also true that you'll see, I think it is true. You will have to correct me on this because I'm running the numbers in my head now, but I think that it's true that you will see that the amount of conversation about both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton has skyrocketed above where it was during the primaries, and I think to some degree is larger than sort of everybody combined during the primaries. Now, it's a bad week to look this week because you'll notice that the past 4 weeks have been fairly low compared to the beginning of August because, of course, it was holiday and nobody was paying attention. I suspect you're going to see it spike again in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to watch that. Now, one thing I've noticed in doing all these analyses over the past year is that the numbers that you have on this barometer reflect likes, comments, and shares on their Facebook page, plus mentions of them by other people.
Right.
Compare the numbers on these pages to the numbers on Facebook's people are talking about this. So if you go to Donald Trump's Facebook page, it says that in the past week, 1.8 million people liked, commented, or shared on his page. But 75 million people liked, commented, shared, or mentioned him. And this is something I've noticed tremendously is that, and this is consistent for all the candidates that I've looked at over the past year, is that as much as 99% of what their buzz is on Facebook alone has nothing to do with things they post themselves. And one thing I've learned is that all these very sophisticated voter persuasion models that the campaigns are using, none of them look at social media content as part of their data for modeling how voters are likely to vote and what their preferences are from day to day.
And part of the problem here, I'll just admit or mention is that USA Today writes a story about Donald Trump, either favorable or unfavorable, doesn't matter. We write a story about Donald Trump. We put it on our Facebook page, and now suddenly it gets, dozens, hundreds of thousands of sometimes shares and comments and stuff. Well, that then, of course, adds into Donald Trump's total. I mean, this is part of the sort of the lather, rinse, and repeat cycle of this particular election, is that Donald Trump tweets at 7 o'clock in the morning, and by the end of the day, 10 million people have seen that tweet, not because they saw it on Twitter, but because I embedded it on a USA Today story. Every embed in that USA Today story counts as a view of that tweet. And of course, the USA Today story gets seen 1 million times, and the New York Times story with the same tweet gets seen 1 million times, and lo and behold, it gets 10 million views on the tweet, but not through the platform, right? It's through our use of the platform.
Right,
That's
right.
part of the distinction.
And this is the classic. This is the way we've always looked at YouTube. You put a video on YouTube, and then you embed it everywhere. And every time somebody views it on a blog or on a news website, they're ticking up the counter on YouTube. I find it to be truly fascinating that so much attention is being given to the campaigns and candidates, and has been for a long time. I remember back in 2008, a Pew study came out in the summer, in June, which said 42% of Americans were going online to check on the candidates in the elections in the United States. And this is in a country where prior to 2008, we were lucky to get people to pay attention to the election more than 2 weeks before the actual election. Now, granted,
Right.
We have early voting, and so voting is a longer period now. But the internet in 2008 and social media since has really lit a fire under voters' attention to the election.
Right. Yeah. Oh no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I think social media has given you an opportunity to be involved in the election at any time you want to be, with anybody you want to be, and it has made it a much more engaged process. It's no longer the passive receipt of political information. It's now. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about some of these Hillary Clinton health stories, the sort of fiction going around conservative circles, which, by the way, in liberal circles, nobody had ever seen it, because you are looking at the wrong social media. I mean, you have to be in that channel. You have to live in that channel to see this stuff. But someone said to me, oh yeah, people were going online for all this information because it's trending in Google, because people go looking for it, because they don't think that there is such a thing as a mainstream media that'll cover any of these stories fairly. So they go and they look to educate themselves and engage themselves in politics. It's a self-motivating process now, much more than it used to be, for better or worse. In this case, this is why we get back to the question about whether or not facts matter. If you are living in a social media channel that just reinforces your beliefs all the time, it doesn't really matter whether the facts are true or not.
Yeah, this has been a really. I mean, I've been struck by Trump's latest commercial where it says, "In Hillary Clinton's America, hundreds of thousands of jobs will be lost. In Trump's America, millions of jobs will be created." And these are assertions, and all I could think of is he's been saying Hillary will just continue Obama's policies, which are terrible, but those policies have been creating 2.5 million jobs a year. So we're already creating millions of jobs. So I don't, this disconnect between what he says and facts. And then on top of that, we have this whole, Hillary has her own issues when it comes to telling the truth. And, it's on a smaller number of topics. It's on topics about defending yourself as opposed to policy topics. And he's constantly able to drive attention to her being less than truthful about her defense of herself, as he's constantly twisting facts about the world.
Well, one of the things interesting about Donald Trump is that he has mastered this sort of, he's unburdened by self-doubt. And so other politicians you have watched, I mean, I grew up in the Al Gore era, in fact, covering Al Gore, and there was not a single thing he said that had not been sort of processed through a system of calculation to make sure it was, as he once said, there is no controlling legal authority, right? You know, a technically accurate statement that meant nothing to anybody else. Donald Trump has the reverse problem, which is basically he'll say anything that's on his mind, whether or not it's true, and it doesn't have to be true. All he says, well, you know, a lot of people are saying, and people who support Donald Trump say, yeah, okay, well, a lot of people are saying that, so we'll just move on from there. It doesn't really matter. The facts sort of don't have to get in the way.
It's so funny because I occasionally turn the tables on him on my social media and say a lot of people are saying this, and try to push something out that's really absurd, or you know, it's loosely connected to reality, and say a lot of people are, and it's true, a lot of people are saying it, and it's funny who pushes back on it. It's it just people get really upset. Oh, you know, that's not true, and you know, well, they care when I say it, but they don't care when other people say it.
Right.
Right.
And by the way, you know, my Twitter feed is sort of ongoing battle with people who are accusing me of being in the pocket of either the Hillary Clinton campaign or the Donald Trump campaign, depending on what story I wrote. And the beauty of it is, it doesn't matter whether the story is true or whether I've said anything remotely close to what they think I've said. All that matters is I've said something offensive to their campaign, and therefore the press, we are the evil people trying to decide the election. We're biased. Must be biased because you said something I disagree with. You must be a bad human being.
Yeah. So I've got Ben Barnett here, who you obviously have heard of.
Outstanding.
I'm going to try to put him on to ask the question. Ben, if I can't hear you, I'm going to take you down and read your question. But let me find you.
This whole platform is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it really is very fascinating. All right, so Ben, I'm putting you up. I'm going to take myself down, and you can have a quick conversation with Paul.
Hey,
Ben,
Paul,
how are you?
Good to see you. So, I've been following your barometer for a little while. It's good to see it back up, and I was curious, you know, as a marketer, that, you know, one of the goals I see in any campaign where you're selling a product or a campaign is to get that free advertising. So, you know, USA Today embedding that link, or, you know, hopefully hundreds of other people actually embedding that link is really, it should be a goal of the campaign. So I'm wondering how, and that to me would be, you know, that sort of earned advertising, you know, is crucial here. So like, how does, you know, USA Today weigh this? You know, is one more effective than the other, a like or a share? It's a lot easier for me to get, you know, 50 interns out there and say, all right, go like everything. It's another for USA Today to embed that tweet. So right. I think that's probably at least one of the few reasons why you see 1.5 million number and then a 75 million number, whatever, you know, the stats you guys just threw out there. So is there, like, does your barometer sort of weigh the differences here?
No, in fact, the barometer does a bunch of things, intentionally does not try a bunch of things. The barometer shows sheer mass, comparative mass over time, which is nice. You can scroll back week by week and you can sort of see things in there. You can obviously see where the peaks are around the conventions. You can see where the peaks are around the debates. But it doesn't make any attempt to sort of analyze where this traffic comes from. Now, I will say that underneath the barometer, there's a bunch of data in there that we are not showing because it just makes it a way too complicated user interface. You know, we just don't want to throw in all the numbers about exactly what percentage of the conversation is women versus men in each category, but we have that information. I've also got information that gets closer to, I think, what you're talking about. I have from Facebook total likes, shares, interactions, and total users. I think Rosenblatt and I talked about this at one point last fall, that you could see the intensity per user, that is the number of interactions per user. Now I've got that underlying data. I'm not showing it on the barometer at this point because it's just another complicating level that we haven't built into it yet. But that, I think, gets more to your point, where I can see that, oh, well, this one individual, the average usage about Donald Trump is 3 posts per user, whereas opposed to the average number of posts per, you know, Scott Walker user was 1 post per user. That would indicate that the Trump people are more engaged than the Walker people. But again, it's a very, very, very broad measure, and I don't ascribe a great deal of predictive power to it.
Mm-hmm.
I scared him off. The power of my reasoning was such that I managed to knock him entirely off of the platform.
No, that was my fault.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I took him down. I'm in control here. Just call me Al Hayes. Right. All right. So let's see. I've got a question for Michelle or Lisa. So I'm going to put Dan Bennett up on the screen for a moment. Paul, I'm going to take you down for a moment. And then Michelle or Lisa, whichever one of you wants to answer this question, just raise your hand and I'll put you up on the screen. So Daniel, I'm going to put you up on the screen.
Okay.
Daniel, you're on. You there? I'm not. Are you there, Daniel? You are not. I'm going to cross here right now. All right, Daniel, I'm going to ask you to type your question, and I will read it. If you could, you can type it into the IM box that we've shown. Well, let's keep this going here. I'm going to bring Paul back up in the meantime. Or maybe actually, I'm going to bring Ken up to say hi. You want to say hi to our esteemed producer. Ken, good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing really, really well. So we've had an interesting conversation both about women in the campaigns and the new Facebook barometer and the impact of all that. Any stories in the news that you think we really should talk about for a bit?
You know, I think Singer made a good point. We're sort of in the middle of a lull, given the holiday and coming out of August, but obviously we're going to turn into the last final corner, heading towards the home stretch. One dynamic that I'm picking up on Twitter, more so than previously, is some pushback at the mainstream media, particularly from some of Hillary Clinton's better-known social media surrogates. They seem to be a perfect example. I think is Matt Lauer is taking a little bit of heat, right?
A little.
Yeah, and that's very much orchestrated. I think there's pretty obvious that speaking points are being sent out to the right people, and that pushback is out there. So that was, I think, one of the more dramatic things, and then the usual interplay between the hardcore Hillary supporters and the hardcore Trump supporters, where it really doesn't matter. Again, Singer made a great point about, as well as yourself, facts are lost on an awful lot of people. One point I want to make, your speakers today were unbelievable. I learned more in a very short period of time about two very distinct and important topics than I have in some time. So kudos to those folks. But one point I want to introduce into the larger dialogue is the actual universe of undecideds is actually very small right now. If you consider that many of the people whom the campaigns are reaching out to, those who say that they're still undecided, a very good chunk of that group just isn't going to vote. And that's what it comes down to. So I think on social media, what we're seeing is this hardening of the two lines, with very few people undecided and not quite sure whether the persuasion on social media is actually going to be the most effective digital media, as opposed to, for instance, email, direct texting, and some of the other off the radar platforms that the campaigns are using.
Yeah, so Singer just texted me that you're exactly right on that point about the small, I think with regard to the small undecided population. It's interesting because if social media is the way to reach people who have really already decided, and that's really the value of it, and I always argue that it's about getting them the material that they would then use to talk to their friends offline. There's an interesting point with regard to, and I'm going to just hold up this article here, 3 reasons why Trump needs to start an advertising blitz, meaning regular TV ads to reach all those people who are undecided or not on social media. And as a corollary to the need to be able to really start this huge advertising blitz, it just came out in the news today that his ad campaign in Michigan ran for 1 week, and it's over. It's over now, and it's still the first week, was just the beginning of the second week of September. It's almost like, I hate to say this, well, maybe I don't hate to say it, but it's like the people running Trump's campaign are amateurs.
Well, they're either amateurs or they're seeing the same thing that maybe some of the people on the other side in the Clinton camp are seeing, which is this universe of persuadables has shrunk so quickly, and perhaps like we've never seen before. We should be right now at the doorstep of the final stage of persuasion in every form of media: traditional television advertising, direct mail, emails, all the digital platforms that you can imagine. But I really believe the 2 campaigns are beginning to realize that this already is a get out the vote kind of election, where you're trying to motivate your base, move those leaners into the solid backing categories, and turn out your vote. I really believe that, in the next probably 3 weeks, the universe of persuadables or undecideds will be so small that you won't be seeing much money being spent on trying to make the argument to bring new people in. More so, you'll be seeing media that basically says, let's get all of you who are with us out to vote.
All right, I'm going to bring Lisa Matz back on screen. I've got a question here from Bennett regarding, I'm going to read it. I've already texted it to Lisa so she can take a look at it while I read it out loud for everybody else. Daniel asked, Senator Claire McCaskill used social media to disintermediate the press because she had some of the same issues that Hillary Clinton had. And he sees that Humans of New York being the first real effort similar to that. Any thoughts? Now,
well, yeah, I mean, I'm really intrigued with the whole idea of the hardening of the electorate in terms of who they're going to vote for. I think that has been happening in an unprecedented way very quickly, even before the conventions, which was not something that we typically have seen. Trying to work around the press, if you're not happy with how the press is interpreting what you're saying, is certainly one option. We've definitely seen, though, with Hillary Clinton that she's not afraid to call out the press if she feels like there are issues. She's done so recently about, Singer mentioned the healthcare or health issues. Does she have health issues, and who's covering that, and where is that coming from? And I saw headlines recently about her telling the press to step lightly about that. Certainly, a lot of this criticism of Matt Lauer is, in many respects, motivated by some really well-placed talking points. That he spent so much time on her emails. So the thing that I would find interesting, though, is that not just are they trying to do an end around the press, but what's their platform to do that? Is it events that they're trying to do to bring more women together? One of the things that Michelle said that I thought was fascinating was the notion that Hillary is having more events, smaller events, to talk to women. This whole listener-in-chief idea. There's been some great information out there that because she's not as comfortable as a kind of barnstorming candidate, that what she really prefers to do is listen and to hear what people have to say. And overwhelmingly, when people go to those events, they really do feel heard. They really do feel like she wants to do something to fix whatever problem it is that they brought to the table. So how are they being, how are they trying to get around the press? Is it events? Is it social media? Is it rallies? Is it stuff specifically on their website? Is it policy proposals? But I think it's something that is going to happen if you're not liking how things are being applied and interpreted.
Yeah. It's just well, I guess we keep seeing fascinating election, completely rewriting the rules, and who knows what's going to happen. We're really way over time. I'm told I have no hard stop, but I do see that people are starting to fade from the room, and I just want to make sure that we are attentive and considerate of people who have to go. And so I want to just, Lisa, any final, I'm going to give Lisa, Michelle, and Paul just a quick moment to do just a really quick final comment if you have it. Lisa, do you want to start?
Yeah, as you said, it's an unprecedented election. I've never seen anything like it. And the predictability factor in terms of traditional campaign methods or ideas or prognostications just don't apply. I'm fascinated to see what happens at the debates. I think they could be a train wreck in many respects. But here's one for you that's just on the fun and lighter side. I want to see what happens with the Halloween masks. That's always been a big predictor. Who has more Halloween masks? But I think once again, Trump is going to throw off the typical prognostication. I think we'll see
a much more fun
masks.
mask.
I'm just saying, with the hair, you just can't go better. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of people would wear his costume to make fun of him as much as to support him.
That's right.
And again, as Paul said with regard to the barometer, without measuring sentiment, you really don't know what all this volume indicates. All right, I'm going to put Michelle up and here. Michelle, any final comment?
Yes. Yeah, just to piggyback on all of that, I think, especially the role of social media. I mean, we've seen in the last two presidentials where social really came into its own as far as being able to do very awesome, like targeted persuasion advertising. And then all of a sudden, even since 12, the algorithms in social have evolved so that really only seeing things that we agree with. And I think that has really caused so much polarization and so much of the issue that we're seeing. So now, there's not a lot of persuadable voters left. And this is really the first time. I think it's going to be fascinating in that every single subsequent election from now on is unprecedented because of the way technology is evolving. And so, this year, I think it is a major GOTV effort. On the Hillary side, it's about, okay, we see lots of great electoral maps, but let's not all get lazy and say, okay, she's going to win or get tired or we're dealing with our kids or whatever, So turning out women, providing childcare, doing all that stuff is going to play a critical role in this election in a way that it hasn't before. Trump is turning out voters who just don't normally vote. And traditional political models are that we target people who do. So all of a sudden, we've got this X factor of people that we don't even know about because they don't historically vote that are starting to turn out to the polls. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Really, really interesting. I always hear people talk about sort of the segregation of social media. People are only hearing themselves. My life, I go out of my way to follow and connect with people on both sides and all sides. And so I don't get that sort of ghettoization in my own feeds. And it's like I encourage people to, men to go out there and set up a dummy account with a fake account, where as a woman so that they can experience the harassment that women typically experience online. I think it's also important that people try to subscribe to people on the other side. Now, of course, you have to be a little careful and try to find people who are civil, but on the other side, and that can be a little bit of a challenge. I've seen a lot of people say that, they're just unfollowing. There's a whole movement of people who think Facebook is not the place for politics, which I think is absurd, but it's a place for all conversation. That's the way, some people are really, really fixated on that and are unfriending their people who are too political in order to clean up their feed. All right, I'm going to bring Paul up for his final comments. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Lisa. And did I lose? I think I lost Paul. Good. Paul, you're coming back up right now. Hello and welcome back.
Welcome back. Yeah, my only takeaway from the election cycle is that here's my prediction. You will see an awful lot of political reporters quitting the business by the end of the year.
Really?
Yeah. It's no fun anymore. We are being bombarded nonstop by social media, which is both demands from our readers to answer their queries, which may or may not be reasonable, demands from our editors to respond to whatever is happening on social media, which may or may not be reasonable, and demands to just being producing, more Snapchats, more tweets, more periscopes, more whatever else, which takes you away from doing the actual reporting you want to be doing to be able to produce the facts and check the facts, as your other guests were talking about. And those of us who've been doing it for a while, we're all standing around at the conventions talking about how these are our last conventions because there's just no fun in it anymore.
So you're saying most of it is coming from your bosses as opposed to the trolls that attacked like Matt Lauer for his performance last night?
It's some of both, I think. Part of it is coming from our bosses because as the technology has changed for journalism, the demands have changed, and we don't really know what is a productive thing to do anymore. So, I'm doing podcasts. We don't know if there's any value to it. I'm doing Shindance with Alan Rosenblatt. We don't know if there's any value to it. All these things that we're trying to do as new ways to reach readers, all of which are good things to do to reach readers, but they're also or some portion of them are futile efforts. And the amount of time you spend on relatively futile efforts and chasing other people's stories has increased dramatically as opposed to spending the time creating your own stories that everybody else has to chase. And it's just really, most of the joy has gone out of politics, particularly since the facts no longer matter, as we were saying before. And any good story is simply met with well, they're just biased, they're just against me, they're all liars, and by the way, what I really said was this, even though you didn't. There's just not a lot of upside to it anymore. So I think you're going to see a lot of burned out, tired, grumpy reporters trying to either switch beats or moving out of the business entirely at the end of the year.
Fascinating. Well, there's already so much pressure in the media industry with people getting laid off and outlets closing. There's this sense that, social media can, citizen journalism can replace it all. But clearly, as I said when I first introduced you, you like getting up in the morning and reading the Federal Register. I don't think we'll ever find anybody on social media that takes that serious of an approach to understanding what the federal government does. And we'll lose that if we lose all these reporters.
Yeah, I mean, somebody has to write the story that everybody else tweets.
Right, exactly. And somebody has to write it who has a set of journalistic ethics that, while maybe the public doesn't believe that you follow them, you clearly do. And
but I will tell you also, if you want to get traffic for your story, don't make it balanced. If I write a story that says that Hillary Clinton, lied on an email, for instance, and leave it at that, that will get plenty of traffic because the Republicans and the conservatives and the anti-Hillary people will drive its traffic. Similarly, if I write a story that says that Donald Trump lied on an email, that'll get an awful lot of traffic from the liberals and Hillary Clinton supporters. If I write a story that says Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton both lied on emails and here's how they did it, story dies. Because neither side wants to promote it, and therefore I'm not helping their agenda, and therefore it doesn't get clicks, and therefore it's not as powerful a story.
just that one point, balance versus objectivity. When does balance make the story non-objective?
Well, Balance is getting all of the points into the story that are reasonable responses that are appropriately delivered, which is to say, I'm not going to put into a story a quote that says, oh yeah, well that guy shot my dog.
Right.
Because it's not true.
Right.
Now, I will give you an opportunity to say, well, I disagree with the story because of this, or I have a personal beef with that person. I will let you put that in the story. But, you know, balance is about telling a story that gives a broad perspective on what people are saying about a topic. And I don't think that it's unfair to include the other side or several other sides if you can find them. But I do believe that we have to, if we're going to include anyone's comments, we have to basically fact check those comments and see whether they're real.
So you have to balance the sides, but you also have to balance the statements versus the facts.
Right.
So balance is not just a single two-dimensional thing.
No, it's not just saying, well, I'm just going to add the Republican quote here. You know, insert Republican quote here. Doesn't work that way.
I think that's a really important point and a good one to end on. And I really thank you for joining us. And again, thanks to Lisa and Michelle. Thanks to the audience who asked questions.
Thank you all.
Those who just enjoyed the show. And we will see you next week. Next week, we will be talking about some cutting-edge technology and online advocacy. We will be talking about the view of American politics on social media from Europe. And we will be talking about a story with Ali Breland from The Hill about the campaign's challenges trying to integrate Snapchat and Periscope in some of these newfangled social media technologies. So thank you to my guests. Thank you to the audience. And this has been the Dr. DigiPol Show. And we will be back next Thursday, as every Thursday at 4 p.m. Thank you so much, and have a great day.